Give me 1 second. Let me grab one thing.
Every time we shoot, he usually gets everything going, and then he walks out of the room for like 10 minutes to take a phone call. And then we forget the cameras are rolling and start talking about obnoxious shit. And then he has like this just blooper roll of dumb things I've said while I forgot the camera was going.
Does he hold on to that for blackmail purposes?
Probably. I don't know. It hasn't come up yet, but I'm sure it will at some point.
Welcome to War Stories, the cybersecurity podcast where we interview real penetration testers about real break-ins and epic hacks. Your host is Zac Davis, experienced physical and cybersecurity tester. In these short episodes, you'll experience the adrenaline rush and hear firsthand what it's like breaking into companies for a living. Enjoy the show.
Well, welcome to the first remote episode of War Stories. We're trying something new today. We've exhausted the greater Philadelphia area as terms as guests, so we need to expand out, and we've got our first guinea pig here today with us, Shelby Spencer. Shelby, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me.
So, most important question, are you a coffee drinker?
I am. I can't function without some coffee in the morning.
Okay. Well, if you haven't noticed, this whole podcast is basically just a big commercial for our coffee brand. So we'll make sure we get a couple bags out to you in the mail after this as a thank you for being on the show. So thank you for being here. Cool. So you are probably extended network for me. I know you worked with John. You were mentioned a bit during his episode. But I personally don't know a ton about your background, except I know you've worked with some really smart people at some cool places. Tell everybody who you are and what you're about and how you got here.
Yeah, my name's Shelby Spencer, and as you mentioned, I've done red team things with some of your previous guests, John Beck in particular. Ever since I was a kid, I saw the Sneakers movie as a child, and I was like, that is the coolest thing in the world. I want to do that when I grow up. And when I got older, I got into college, I got a computer science degree, and I was like, how does one even go about getting into the field of like red teaming and hacking? But I was doing lots of programming stuff at the time because that's how I could find jobs to support myself. And I eventually got lucky in that I was working for Lockheed Martin and doing programming for them, and they had an internal pen testing team. And I just became the biggest pain in the ass to those guys that I possibly could. Like every week I'd go talk to them. I'd be like, hey, are there any openings? Hey, I'm kind of interested in this stuff. Hey, do you guys remember me? And eventually they got tired of hearing from me, I think. And they
wheel gets the oil.
Yeah. They decided that they're like, well, we really need to make this position where we have someone that like reviews other developers' code and make sure it's secure and helps train developers in doing secure coding. And they're like, would you be interested in that? I said, yeah, that sounds great. So I started doing that for a while, and eventually they let me move on into doing pen testing. And after that, the rest is kind of history. I, did the usual seat time with things like PCI pen testing, and then eventually I got to move into the more fun kind of serious red teaming stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, that's how. And then I eventually ended up at SEVN-X and worked with all those guys.
Yeah. So I got to ask, so what, as far as the timeline, I mean, when you were, the term red teaming, I guess, well, for one, anybody who does red teaming probably has some qualms with how that gets thrown around these days and the way it's kind of turned into a marketing term. But I sort of noticed the red team term coming into play around like 2016, 2017, when I was like kind of working my first senior job. But if you were back at Lockheed doing, I guess, development work, was red teaming like a thing yet at that point? Or was it still kind of like, finding that vernacular was finding its way into the industry, I guess?
Yeah, back then, like it was either penetration testing or tiger teaming was still being thrown around a bit. I don't know that I ever heard the term red teaming per se, but even then, like there was clearly a need for something that described the more stealthy, goal-oriented type of security testing as opposed to the pen testing, scan everything, find all the vulnerabilities type approach to the world.
So I got to ask, and I'm putting you on the spot, and this is a question that's just popped into my head, but if If you had to explain the difference like between a red team and a pen test, like what's the breakdown for you?
For me, I think red teaming is truly trying to emulate an attacker. So, number one, you want to be stealthy. You don't want to get caught, ideally, and you want to go after something that, as we used to describe it, the thing that keeps the CEO up at night. You want to find the things in the company that are like the crown jewels or their most sensitive areas to an attacker, and you want to find a way to attack that to demonstrate those attacks are viable and help the company find those weak paths throughout their network and fix those problems. Whereas pen testing, it's more basically scanning everything, being noisy, and then when you find stuff, you're going one step farther than a vulnerability scan. You're trying to chain a couple of them together to show that there's a path for an attacker to move through their network and do bad things. So, as I always used to say, pen testing is something that every company, in my opinion, should do. Once you start passing your pen tests regularly, you should maybe start talking to a good red team to help you explore the areas that maybe aren't so obvious. And with red teaming, I think we take a lot more advantage of bad processes and abusing things that are working the way they're supposed to be working versus, oh, there's a vulnerability that everyone knows about that, there's a CVE for, and exploiting that.
Got it. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I totally agree with the approach. I always kind of think of it, if I'm going to explain it really simply, like a pen test is focused on vulnerability identification. Red team is focused on evaluating detection and response capabilities. And, I think you elaborated on that really well. Another one I'll always explain is like on a pen test, you might be trying to get DA, but more likely than not on a red team, you're going to be avoiding the DA accounts like the plague, because those are the ones that are going to get alerted on. What you really are just trying to find is the minimum amount of privileges to get at whatever the crown jewels are for that organization. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely a maturity. We kind of always recommend to our clients, there's like a maturity model. It's like, get your vulnerability management figured out, then you're probably ready for a pen test. Once you, again, are those findings are starting to drop off the pen test, then it's probably good to start thinking about red teaming and like, tuning your detection capabilities. So,
yeah.
Anyway, fun little tangent. Cool. So you mentioned the development background. I've kind of made this distinction before and brought it up a few times. I always kind of joke I'm a really good script kiddie. I don't really consider myself a hacker because I don't write the tools. I've just gotten good at using them. And I think there's a place for that in the industry for sure. But given your development background, time on the SEVN-X red team, I'm guessing you've done a fair bit of tool development yourself.
Yeah, I've my entire career, I've kind of had a foot in both worlds, in the development world as well as the red teaming world. And both of those skill sets have been very synergistic. When I was working at SEVN-X, I helped a lot writing tools internally, and a few of them that have been released out to the public. But it's really helpful when you're trying to exploit processes and programs to understand the kind of thought process of the developers that build these things and the kind of assumptions they typically will make. So I've found that to be really useful throughout my career. Plus, being able to throw a script together really quick to do something as part of a red team engagement is really crucial sometimes.
Sure. Yeah. The most successful red team engagements I ever worked is when I was paired up with one of my close friends who was just like an incredibly talented developer. And I think we made a pretty good team because he could sit back and do the tooling and the infrastructure and some of those things. And then, the social engineering, the phone calls and some of the other reconnaissance and other stuff like that. I could kind of take the lead on that. And then once we got some access, we could both put our heads together and, try and figure out what we were doing on the internal network, which worked out really well. So I guess given your tool development background, what are some of the favorite tools you have, or maybe some of the cool tools you developed you'd want to talk about? Either one, I guess.
Yeah, sorry. One of my favorite tools that's been publicly released is a tool called a Jenkins Attack Framework. And any pen tester or red teamer, we always love to find a Jenkins build server because it's always a good place to harvest credentials and stuff. There are a lot of tools out there, but this tool I've released years ago, and I think it's still relevant. It does a bunch of cool things that I didn't see one tool doing in the past. So some of the things it does is it will scrape the last output of every build job on the server if you have privileges, and help so you can find credentials that are exposed in those. It will export credentials for you in a bunch of different ways, including creating jobs that just dump all the credentials in a base64 format and then pulling them back out on the other side, because Jenkins will redact credentials for you. And then one of the coolest things, and this is the one thing I still haven't seen another tool do, is I found a way on both a Windows and a Linux or OS X Jenkins slave to create a job and then hide the job and make it so it runs indefinitely. So you can
Persistence.
you could drop your persistence on a Jenkins slave and then make the job disappear in Jenkins, and it'll just continue to run indefinitely. Whereas normally Jenkins will time out at some point and kill the job.
Oh,
So,
very cool. Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen Jenkins on a test. We have a junior guy that we're training in the lab today, and we were going over some internal pen tests, like kind of techniques and methodology stuff. And one thing he's like, well, do you ever go after web applications? And we started talking about, kind of the general sweep we'd do on a pen test, looking for, your Tomcats, your JBosses, some of those types of things. And Jenkins came up. And so it's funny you bring up the Jenkins Attack Toolkit, because I know it's still out there quite a bit. I just personally haven't seen it lately.
it's starting to go away. People are moving to like GitHub Actions and that kind of thing for good reason. It needs to go away.
Yeah, well, definitely it's caused more than a few problems for different companies over the years.
For sure.
Very cool. Sweet. Well, with all the red teaming you've done, what kind of stories you got for us today? We've had a lot of physical ones. I'm sort of hoping you might have like a network based one or something from a red team to mix it up a bit. But we always love the physical stories too, if that's what you brought.
Oh, I've got physical stories, but I've got a couple interesting network ones. So since you've heard of some good physical ones lately, maybe we'll stick to those.
Awesome.
One of them that I did that I think was really cool was that I got the opportunity to test a company that controls and monitors farming equipment. So
Really?
it allows
Okay.
so it allows big farming companies to plan routes for the machines, the combines and things going back and forth on their fields and everything, and route those out and then monitor them. And so naturally, the goal of our test was to see if we could get into that infrastructure and take it over and see what kind of things an attacker might be able to do. Like, would we be able to run these things into ditches or onto highways or something like that?
Sure. That could get bad real fast.
Yeah, it'd be like that. What was it? Short Circuit movie or whatever from the 90s. Not quite that bad, but you could see how that could cause a lot of damage if you could route one of those machines around. So for this company, we started doing the usual fishing and also probing their exterior, and I managed to find an old JBoss server that had been left out in the wild forever. The only reason,
low-hanging fruit web applications, it's like JBoss, Tomcat, Jenkins. It's like whenever you see those pointing to the internet, it's usually not a good thing.
Yeah, the only thing I can think, the only reason it hadn't been caught or exploited horribly by the time I found it, I think, was because it was behind reverse Nginx proxy.
Okay.
And so like all the other ports were blocked and it didn't give off the usual signatures. I guess and some of the JBoss routes had been blocked. Like it almost looked like somebody had tried to harden it at one point, but didn't quite know what they were doing. It was also not one of the common versions that where they had all the precompiled, exploit jars that you could just throw onto it to get code execution. So I had to go, but it was still really old. So I was able to eventually go compile my own jar file. That's a Java compiled app based that you can hand to a JBoss server, and if it's unauthenticated, and especially if it's old, you can exploit it to get remote code execution. So we were able to do this, but to begin with, we weren't able to get a shellback or anything because they had a lot of controls on their external egress to prevent
like
things
outbound
going out.
They weren't like allowing SSH or whatever it might be, HTTP outbound. They were doing some blocking.
what we eventually figured out was that this stuff was all located in Amazon's cloud, and they did allow SSH out to other things in Amazon cloud and not just their ranges. So we were eventually able to get a reverse shell out via SSH into another Amazon box, which was
Okay.
so we got our foothold. It was really, it was one of those things where someone tried and you're like, oh, they tried really hard, but they missed the mark a little bit. But that's the thing that a red team finds. Like you do all this hardening, and it's really easy to miss these little gaps.
Sure.
So we had access to this box, and it was some very ancient, even for the time, Red Hat box. So we were able to get a publicly known local privilege escalation vulnerability, so we could go from this unprivileged JBoss account to root on the box. And then with root access to the box, we did the usual thing, looking for SSH keys and looking at the history of on the box for the various user accounts. And we were able to start moving around the network with some of the SSH keys we got. And that kept us busy for quite a while. But everything, they had really good filter, like segmentation in their network. So we were kind of in a little walled garden. But eventually, one of the boxes we got onto, we saw in the history one of the users had been accessing one of the switches from that box, and so from there, we were actually able to. He accidentally mistyped. You know when you're typing really fast and you try and sometimes you SSH in and then you type your password and hit enter or whatever. We got really lucky, and in his bash history was the password for the switch.
Oh man! So like so for the non-technical audience, basically when you log into another system over SSH, like you'll type in your user or the command to connect, and then you type in your password. But if you screw up the command, basically you'll type it into the terminal and hit enter, and then that gets logged in the history file. So if you go back through and look through a history file, you can see they were trying to connect to something, botched it, typed in their password, and then didn't remove it. So now you have their password, which is pretty lucky find.
It was a very lucky find. So that got us on the Cisco switch, and from there we were able to give ourselves access. This, of course, we had to go talk to the client about this because we were making configuration changes, but we eventually were able to punch a hole so that we could get through to the rest of their cloud network. Unfortunately, the cloud network that we were in wasn't where most of their software was. This was some mostly retired architecture, and they were moving out of it to a new location. So what we ended up doing was we found, through looking around at the other stuff we had access to, we eventually found an open VPN server, which is a virtual privacy network. It's a way they had it allowed their users in their office to connect into this environment to, manage stuff and do some development in parts of this network. And with the credentials that we'd managed to get from hopping around grabbing SSH keys, we were able to get on this open VPN server, which eventually allowed us to put code in the triggers in the VPN configuration that would go down to users. So this allowed us to get shells on user boxes when they would when they would use OpenVPN to connect to this network.
Wow, you guys are doing a lot of custom tradecraft for this one. I mean, this must have been a long engagement.
Yeah. So this was a red team engagement. This was like a 2-month engagement, and since we didn't usually when we would do engagements like that, we would spend roughly a month trying to fish in and get access. But we'd found this external access fairly early on. So we had kind of a lot of extra time on this one. So we were doing a lot of kind of extra custom stuff for this. And this was a first time client, so we really wanted to impress them. So we're going the extra mile, as it were. So now we had access to some fairly powerful users' workstations, which we could then do some key logging and eventually get some credentials for.
Try and find some more SSH keys for maybe the more juicy environments.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so once we by looking at their browser history, we found that the way they would manage their product was they would actually just log into it in their browser with their credentials, and some of the users had admin access to the backend where they could basically access all of their customers and control all the things. So that made the report really fun to write. We had all of these screenshots of seeing various farms in their system and seeing the little combines running back and forth and the routes and showing how we could manipulate the routes if we wanted to. So
That's
that was really
super
fun
cool.
just because a lot of the types of attacks that we end up doing, everything ends up staying, in the digital space. And this was one where the attack, we could directly show how we could impact things in the real world and cause potentially like life-threatening injury and that kind of thing. And by we, of course, we're always acting as as a an avatar for an attacker and what an attacker might do in that scenario.
Yeah, I always think I had an old boss who used to call it the so what factor. It's like we were working with a lot of like banks and credit unions who the main stakeholder who bought the pen test might be, the president of the bank or something who had no technical background. And it's like if you told them, oh, we got DA on your network, like they don't know what domain admin means. That doesn't really have a ton of context. But if we say we have access to your core banking application and all your customers' data, like that drives the point home. This has got to be one of the most like clear and like I don't know, large scale so what factors ever. Like if you're literally able to take over like $1 million pieces of machinery and navigate them off course, that's pretty epic.
Yeah, that's the other thing that maybe a lot of people don't realize. This was not our customers, so I'm going to use them as an example. But John Deere is like the famous company that produces all this farm equipment and also has similar types of remote control that you can do. And their pieces of their tractors and their combines and that kind of thing can be easily hundreds of thousands of dollars a piece. So even just being able to trash that equipment is a huge cost.
It's funny, this is totally off topic, but I've heard that there's a whole community of hackers who support John Deere customers in getting around like basically the way I understand it is to swap out certain parts, and I don't even know if it's John Deere specifically. I know it's large farm equipment. I'll just say that. I don't think it's a common or a problem to them specifically. It's a common problem, but the way this farm equipment is designed is like if you're going to replace a part, it has to be coded into the software that runs the machine. And if you don't have a license to make that change through an authorized dealer, which costs thousands of dollars, sometimes replacing like a $5 part, which farmers have grown up or, they've always fixed their own equipment. And now all of a sudden they're not able to do that without paying John Deere. So there's this community of hackers who are like basically rooting the software that's used to like manage these things and offering like services to allow farmers to maintain their own pieces of equipment, which I think is pretty wild.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge market, and John Deere is one of the worst ones as far as putting on, controls on that kind of stuff. But on the flip side of that coin, of course, is that a lot of these tractors are leased to own because they're so expensive.
Yeah.
So John Deere has a vested interest in that for a period of time, and also, when you're doing hardware at that scale, they typically sell all kinds of service agreements with that kind of thing, and obviously they want to make money, but also they kind of want to know that the parts they're dealing with are the parts they put in, and they want to be able to have that chain of custody all the way down to even the little parts. So there's a lot of competing interests there, I guess I would say.
Definitely. Yeah, no, it's always two sides to the coin. Sort of wonder how long before that potentially will work its way into like the car market. I feel like I don't know what it is, but like with the electric cars, I guess it's just maybe like because it's new technology, but I feel like those are so much more like subscription based and so much more interconnected than a internal combustion engine vehicle. You see a little bit of it. Like I'm a big car guy and I have a newer BMW and I go through a set of brake pads at the racetrack, and by the time I've driven home, like the dealership has emailed me like that my brake pads are bad, and like I kind of always wonder like how long before they're charging subscription fees for whatever it might be. I think we kind of heard about like seat warmers and different things like that they want to charge monthly fees for, but I guess that's the price you pay for having new technology in your life.
Yeah, kind of related side note. People in my family and people I meet, they're like, "Oh, you're this big hacker guy who does like security and stuff, and you do all this technology things. you must have like the latest Amazon Echoes and everything in your house. And I'm like, no, like I like technology, but I also understand the weaknesses and the security vulnerabilities to having like always on things listening to me, and every company being able to get all this telemetry about me and sell it. So no, my house is pretty Spartan compared to most people I know.
I fought that battle for so long with my wife, and eventually she just went and bought one anyway, and now I'm used to it and add stuff to the grocery list just like everybody else. But it always comes up when I'm talking to other hackers, and they'll mention stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, I lost that battle. Amazon's been in my house for years now. I just hope
That's
they're,
Siren song. It'll call you in.
I had a really interesting. I was for a while I had another startup, and I had hired this marketing, or a friend of mine who does a lot of marketing, to help me with like SEO, and he invited me to a party that was basically filled with SEO marketing people. And I was talking about how I had a Pi hole set up on my network, and I don't know if you're probably familiar with the Pi hole, but for the audience, it's basically you could configure a Raspberry Pi to be a DNS server, and then you could get these dynamically updated lists that would basically block all ads. So it's like any sort of known IP address or URL that was associated with advertising or data collection, like you'd block all of it at like basically at the DNS level. So like your house would kind of become this black hole. You wouldn't get it. You'd cut down on a lot of ads you'd get while browsing the internet and doing other things. But I was explaining that I had one of these, and their take was, well, now you're not going to be like, you're missing out because you're not going to be served the ads like related to your interests. Like, why wouldn't you want those things to be given to you? And I'm just like, we're coming from two different perspectives here. Like, there's not much middle ground. Like, I'm not, we're not playing the same game, which is kind of funny to think about. But
very true. Yeah. It's like we're not in the same state. We're not even on the same planet right now in this conversation.
No, yeah, it's like I literally go to conferences that are about the exact opposite of what you're describing right now. But cool. Well, do you got anything else for us? Another story?
You mentioned banks earlier, and my next story is about a bank that I got to attack. And it started out pretty normal for the kind of red team engagements we would do. We were able to get a foothold in the bank through a phishing email. At this point, I don't remember exactly what attack vector. Back then, it was probably still some Word document with like macros and something like, oh, if this document appears scrambled, please enable macro. With the helpful little directions at the top. But anyhow, we had access to a user, and our goal for this engagement was to see if we could get to a place where we could move money without being detected at the company.
Sure. Do some wire transfers or modify an ACH file, something like that.
Yep. And usually for most customers, if and when we thought we got to a place where we could do something like that, that's typically where the engagement would end, where they would just say, okay, yeah, we either agree with you, or no, we don't think so for these reasons, and no, we don't want you to demonstrate it because regulations and such and whatever, or they just didn't want to be shown that it was still possible. So anyway, at that point, Kerber roasting had just become a big thing, and for people that don't know what Kerber roasting is, it's still a thing today in Microsoft networks. There's kind of this way of aliasing accounts where you can where an account can pretend to be another account for various purposes. And what's interesting about this is, even if, as long as you have an authenticated account on that network, you can request what's called a ticket in Kerberos, but it's basically a way to start the authentication process. And for these, they're called SPINs, service principal names. When you request that ticket, it will be signed with the hash of the credential for that account. And so basically, it's a way to quickly grab these things that you can take offline and try and guess passwords for it, and and compare it and know if you guess the correct password through a hashing function. The details are complicated, but the bottom line is you could go request these things and then take them offline and try and crack them and get potentially very powerful credentials.
Yeah, and usually I'd say the most important part is usually the accounts that have an SPN set are highly privileged, tied to an important database or an administrative service or something that's going to be hitting a lot of different or be able to hit a lot of different systems on a network.
Yeah. And for this particular engagement, the customer had been really straightforward with us. They're like, we want to give you the best chance of success. So we're going to kind of walk you through at a high level how Swift transfers happen in the company. And Swift is a financial network. It's one of the ways that banks transfer money between different accounts across banks as well. And so they were really excited, and they're like, all our users have to two-factor authenticate to this jump server, and then they use an app over remote desktop. And there's 3 levels of confirmation for any payment over a certain amount, and we monitor when people are in the office and if they're on vacation and that kind of stuff. We've got all these checks in place. We're like, okay, thank you. And it was like, that was really nice. And I would recommend that to anyone who's looking to get red team engagements. Yes, a red team person can spend a lot of your money bumbling around trying to figure out how things operate, but ideally your security should be able to withstand an attacker who has all the knowledge of how things work at a high level. So your worst case scenario and one of your most common risks is the malicious internal employee who's disgruntled, or especially if you're somebody that nation states go after, they may actually get someone. They'll either turn someone in your corporation, or they'll get someone hired there who's malicious. So you just save yourself a lot of money, and you get better results, I think, when you start with that kind of perspective.
Totally agree. I always say that like pen testing is time boxed, but real world attackers have all year. So like if I could figure this out in 6 weeks, like you can pay me for 6 weeks to figure it out, but it'd be much more economical for you to just tell me at least like get me moving in the right direction so I can see if this is actually exploitable versus, taking the time to figure out all the little details. And on the insider threat thing, I was just reading something that I think there was someone in Arizona or something who had helped facilitate like all these North Koreans getting hired at all these different businesses. So it's like the insider threat thing is totally like real and happening now. So anyway, didn't mean to derail the story, but good points.
Especially as it's becoming more and more difficult from a technical point of view. I think we're gonna see more of that. And like you said, it's like 6 months on average before an attack gets detected on these, at least on some of these big attacks. So that's a long time for an attacker to fumble around looking at your internal documentation and trying to figure out how things work. But anyway, so we did find one of these SPNs that we could crack and get back a powerful account. And this bake was kind of like that meme that I think everyone's seen, where there's a road and there's a kind of gate across it, and then in the snow you see all the tracks just going all the way around the gate on the side.
Sure.
Like, they had a very good process for normal employees to go through, but and if you went down that path, you were going to have a bad day as an attacker. But there were a lot of ways to kind of circumvent that path through the back end, through the technical side of things. So with these credentials we found, we were able to get on several remote desktop servers. Not that one where they did all the sensitive stuff. That was segmented in a whole other network with a bunch of controls around it, and very limited users with permissions. But through the kind of the recursive process of getting on servers, dumping credentials out of LSASS, which in Windows is a process that stores all of the sometimes plain text credentials of users who are currently logged into that system. We were able to eventually get a more powerful administrator who did have access to access this terminal server that all of these users were remote desktoping into to access the bank software. And so with that, we were able to get on this terminal server. Well, now we have like a watering hole of all of these users who potentially have the ability to move money logging into this thing. And so by dumping credentials repeatedly out of LSASS on that server, we were able to get the credentials of the domain credentials of these users who had the potential access to move money.
So you're just waiting around for a couple days, sucking up all those credentials as users are going about their business.
Yep.
Nice.
And in the meantime, we're taking those credentials and then we're accessing things like their Office 365, like their calendars, seeing when they're in the office, when they normally work, checking out their email, that kind of thing. Just trying to get a feel for how they act, because as an attacker, we want to emulate a normal user doing normal business as usual as much as possible so we don't get caught. So we're doing that process. We have the first piece of the puzzle. We have their credentials and we have access to the server that they jump to. We still needed their two-factor authentication tokens because they had to use that both for the remote desktop, but also to prove each of these transfers at each of the three steps that they had of approval processes. So we kept looking around, and eventually we got lucky by rolling up credentials like we'd done before. We eventually found someone who was an RSA admin. Now they used RSA two-factor, which is a little hardware token that I think many people are familiar with at their corporations. I think they're starting to go out of vogue, but they're just a little key fob that has a number that rotates every minute on it.
I think they're moving to the phones a little bit more these days, but I think a lot of people who've been in IT will have had those at some point or another.
Yep. And we still didn't have access to that server because that server, the credentials weren't tied into Active Directory. But eventually we got lucky with one of the admin users had shared, it was using the same password for his Windows domain account as the RSA console. So that got us into the RSA console where you could register these hardware fobs. They said that they didn't use software tokens because they didn't trust them. But this admin had the ability to create software tokens. The problem with that, though, was that if we created a software token for a specific user, it would email them and say, "Here, you created the software token. Go download the software over here and do this thing to register it on your computer." So at that point, we talked back and forth, and we just spent days watching these transfers happening and kind of looking at the emails that were generated. And we finally thought we had everything we needed to move money. So we wrote our report and we said, hey, we have all the pieces of the puzzle to do this. Here's some redacted screenshots showing that we saw the email process and some pictures of the application. We think we could figure it out. So given enough time, we could move some money. Well, what the client that we sent it to was like terrified that we'd gotten this far and had demonstrated this access. But some of management was like, we have all these protections in place. Like we would
never go out. That's what they said.
Yeah,
it never would have went out. We would have noticed. It would have been caught by this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, this is what usually happens when you get that far. You write the report, you say, here's all my proof that I think I could do this. No, we didn't actually do it because obviously we can't move the money, steal money. And that's it. And they'll dispute it. And maybe, hopefully, they'll actually take it seriously and fix it. But this was one of the cases where they actually pushed back and said, we don't think you can do this. And we want you to prove it. And we're willing to pay for you to try to spend an extra week or two doing it. And so we're like, okay. So we spent more time going through all the stuff with a fine-tooth comb. And finally, my other partner on the test was like, yeah, I'm sure we can do this. And they were like, okay, well, we have this account. We're going to put $500,000 in it. Here's another account. We want you to move at a different bank. We want you to move the money to there. And we want you to do it on a conference call. So this was $500,000 they wanted us to move.
That's
and they wanted us
a huge amount. I can't believe they gave you that much money. That's amazing.
Well, our point of contact over there was a G. He wanted us to have this massive impact. He's like, if you move 50K, they're going to say, well, that wouldn't have triggered all of our extra things that we have for large.
It's under the threshold, right?
Yeah. So he's like, I think you can do this, and I want there to be no doubt if you move this money that there's a problem here. So we got set up. The hard part was we were like, how are we going to do this on a phone call with it was literally, they wanted a conference call with like 5 high-level execs on this call, like on a Zoom call, watching us perform these steps of the attack.
Dude, and if it's anything like the engagements I've worked on when these things are happening, it's so intense. You're like sitting there with whoever your partner is, like you're swearing a bunch, like, oh, I don't fucking know, man. I don't know if this is going to work. Like, should we wait? Like, it's not something you want to do with an audience. Like, it's nerve-wracking.
You're sweating, you're doing stupid things and mistyping stuff. And you're like, that's not, they're like, no, this is what you have to do. So I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. So we got everything prepped as we could. And the day of, we start this conference call and all these people join on. And we're like, okay, we're going to demonstrate this. So the actual process to do this was we looked at people's schedules. We found people that were going to be working that day, but were taking a lunch break I think we tried to time it around a lunch break period where we knew they were typically not in the office because their chat in Outlook, I mean their Teams chat or whatever it was, I think it was Link back then, would show them as away.
Sure.
And we would go into their email account. We would set up a bunch of rules to block all the transfer emails that were about to get sent out, or the hey, you need to go approve this transfer. Block the RSA emails so they just get deleted. Then I would go into the RSA admin. I'd add a software token. I would flip that over to my buddy. He would install it on his computer. Then he would log into the app for the first user. He watched enough of these transfers and looked at them that he knew how to fill out the huge form, because there's all this regulatory crap you have to fill in on this form in this app. Move to start the process. While he was doing that, I set up the next account the same way and the third account, and then we just moved it through all three processes, and we finished it. And there was just kind of like stunned silence on this conference call. And then one of the people is like, "I see a notice about the transfer at the other bank account." And they're like, and then someone at the call was just adamant. They're like, "Sure, of course, but it's going to get pulled back. Like, it's going to get detected within the 24 hours. We've got 24 hours. We can call it back." And we're like, "Okay, well, let us know how it goes." And sure enough, we got the money out. Like, it did raise alarms for sure. There were people freaking out, but the money ended up in the other account. And we're like, if we were an attacker at that point, we're going to move that money again.
Yeah, it's going to be gone immediately. Yeah.
So that's the closest I've ever come to actually robbing a bank. And it was just so, I was terrified of doing this live in front of all of these people, and obviously trying not to swear too much on the call. But in the end, it turned out to be one of the coolest things I ever got to do, because normally people don't get to you're always in your writing, you're trying to write this amazing narrative that sounds really cool, but it's rare that you actually get to show an attack that's so impactful to the customer directly.
That is so cool. I've done one red team where we had the same thing, where it was trying to transfer money, and we got all the way there. Kind of the same thing where we're pretty sure we could do this. I'm trying to remember if we were going to try and do a wire transfer, if we were just editing an ACH file. But originally, when we were planning the engagement, I think we were coming in through the chief risk officer, and he's like, "I'm going to give you my bank account, and we're going to, we'll have you transfer 20 years, and you'll transfer out $5,000 or something like that." And then when we actually got to the point where we're like, "Yeah, we think we can do this," they're like, "Oh no, I don't think we should do this. We're just gonna take your word for it at that point and stop." So pretty cool that you actually got to go all the way along, and with that much money makes it even so much more cool. Because that's what they always talk about, the thresholds. Oh well, anything over 50 grand is gonna implement these other checks and balances, blah blah blah. So. Pretty awesome proof of concept out in the wild.
Yeah, it was really fun. The other thing about that one that had been really frustrating the first time around is we actually did get the Swift, files. We had access to them where we could manually modify some of those files, but we were like, this is really complicated. I'm not sure we could do this safely by editing them. So we ended up going the route that we did, which ultimately looked cooler, of going through all three different steps of approval processes in their app and having it push it out the other end for us.
That's super cool. Yeah. And I keep thinking those banking systems are always so incredibly complicated. The time it must have taken to map all that out, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's one of the more research heavy engagements I ever had. But again, that demonstrates, I think, the difference between the pen test and the red team there, where with something like that, you spend so much time just reading wikis and internal documentation and trying to learn basically what an employee's job in a matter of days or weeks that might take them months or years to fully learn, because you just need to have that kind of knowledge to be able to emulate them effectively in the environment.
Yeah, and it's really cool. The highest level of testing, though, in my opinion, and it's I think can be incredibly impactful, especially in the right organization that really wants to get better and really wants to improve. I think can be incredibly valuable engagements for some of the big mature guys. Very cool stuff.
For sure.
Cool. Well, man, Shelby, we're up to almost 50 minutes. I was gonna say maybe we have time for one more, but I think we should probably call it there. And I think that's a pretty good note to end on. Thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else you wanna leave us with, or anything you want to plug? Do you have a GitHub or a blog or anything you release tools on?
Yeah, you can find me on GitHub at Shellster, Shellster. You'll find me there and various things I worked on in the past, and generally around the internet, you can find me with that. So, yeah, thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Yeah, me too. These are two really unique stories. I really enjoyed it, and I think our technical audience will as well. They were fun ones. So thanks a lot for being here. Thanks for being the guinea pig on the first remote one, and we will make sure we get you some cyber coffee out in the mail. You'll have to send me your address after we hang up. So
For sure. And I guess if people saw this, then the remote recording worked.
yeah, yeah, exactly. You've got the backup, right? So between the two of us, I think we'll be able to make it happen. But hopefully, Squadcast came through, and we can start interviewing a few more people from around the country, which will be fun.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Shelby. Really appreciate it. Great time talking.